And welcome, everyone, to Rock M Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts, and we are live on YouTube for Rock M Plus subscribers. It's already Season 9, and we are here to talk about your Missouri basketball Tigers. I can no longer attest to us being the only basketball podcast, or the only Missouri basketball podcast, because apparently there is another one out there. So congrats to those guys for starting
Welcome.
Yeah, we're one of two. But yeah, I am your host, Sam Snelling. If you have not joined us before, make sure you're clicking the like and subscribe button, which is at the bottom of this window. And then with me tonight, as usual, Matthew Harris. Matt, how are you?
Like the Missouri basketball team, I'm back to neutral after this weekend. I'm back to neutral. Friday was frustrating. Sunday afternoon, better. And so I come to this pod with equilibrium restored. A little chillier here than I want to be in Indianapolis. But otherwise, where I think I should be after 3 games of non-conference basketball.
Well, we know that we know Dennis likes to tinker, and we know the tinkering can sometimes have mixed results.
Mm-hmm.
I thought overall the game at Howard went pretty well. They slipped with some of their defensive assignments at times, but I didn't really have any huge complaints coming out of that game. And then you get kind of smacked in the face a little bit with like how they played against SEMO. In a little bit of, and I don't want to make this like we're going to defend that performance. I don't necessarily think it should be defended. I thought SEMO, I watched a little bit of their game against SLU. I thought they played horribly against SLU. You and I are both fans of Brad Korn and the job that he's done there. They're a quality OVC team. I think they're going to contend for the top of the league this year. And they shot really well. So it's like, okay. At the same time, please defend. Please play defense. Please, you should be able to stop OVC guys from getting rebounds. You should be able to stop OVC guys from getting any shot they want. And so, like, it did, funnily enough, remind me a lot of that Eastern Washington game, which, last year, for people that don't remember, I mentioned in study hall already, the Eastern Washington, near disaster before Caleb Grill went absolutely nuclear. And I think he had 33 points and made like 8 threes or something ridiculous, and basically suspended Missouri, high enough above Eastern Washington to where that game was secured thanks to Caleb Grill. Mark Mitchell kind of did the same thing for the Tigers. He was great once he figured out his free throw shooting. Thankfully that looks like that's been fixed. But then it really was a palate cleanser to watch them essentially annihilate VMI throughout the second half. And you did your rewatch of the first half. I haven't gotten through to the full rewatch yet. And your takeaways, defense that you thought was a little better than you might have thought after your first impression.
Yeah, there were 2. I'll just run through it. There were 2 made threes on broken floors, which basically mean that there were near turnovers. And so Missouri's out of the shell. They're trying to get out and run. VMI comes up with the ball, bang in 2 threes. So there's 6 points. There were 2 contested threes at the end of shot clocks, including Clark's banker to start the game. Tanya Gazulu hits one later on, so that's 12 points. So you've got 12.
They've had 3 banked in 3-pointers in the last 2 games. Is that right?
Right. So those 4 3 makes right there are either contested or against situations where the defense is broken because you think you're running out in transition. You can excuse those to a certain extent. And then there are 2 straight line. Then there are 2 drives. There's a third, which, depending on how you think if it should have been cut off on the angle at the first point of attack, but there's a help defender that gets there on time in rotation. Regardless, there are 3 drives in the first half where a smaller defender has to finish over a bigger Mizzou defender walling up, and they convert. So that is 18 points right there in tough shot making or in broken floors, and they score 40 in the first half. Now let's say you give them half those points because they're going to, just because we want to be charitable. We don't want to say Mizzou would have been perfect there. Now it's 50-31 at halftime, and you're looking at it like, okay, Missouri's tracking and hitting the margin. I do think there were issues early on and late in the first half with Missouri's off-ball screen navigation. Specifically, TJ Johnson could shed Javon Porter with ease. They would run him either off. Sometimes they put him in, double staggers, or they'd have him kind of curl, like a curl off the wing to the corner. He shed him pretty easily there. There was a blown pick and pop where Luke Northweather and Mark Mitchell both go with the handler. Nobody recovers back to the screener. And there's a second one where Mark doesn't close out under control, flies by, bites on a shot fake, and then Johnson sidesteps for a jumper. So I think there were issues with the guys that are nominally 4 men that they've slid up to try on the wing. And they got caught in some cross matches where they just couldn't lock and trail with a shooter. And I think that's something to put a pin in. I think that's a real concern on that front. I don't think you want to see Javon Porter and Mark Mitchell having to consistently be lock and trail and running around screens everywhere. That's not what you brought them here for. You brought them here for their size and their length, to kind of either be off-ball defender helps or play at the 4 and be a little bit more mobile against some 4s in the SEC. So there were issues off the ball. There were a couple of times where, again, Missouri got leveraged and they got 2 passes away to the midline and they got punished on skips. But much better, I think, at the point of attack. And you can chime in if you thought they were better at times on the ball. But there were some issues off the ball, I thought, in the first half that cropped up. But there were also some tough shots that got made. So you can trade it a little bit there, but I think it probably should have been a 15, 16-point lead at the break, maybe a little bit more. And then the shot making kind of normalized in the second half, and Missouri blew it open. So I think when I was going through and marking stuff, there was not near the number of clips getting snapped tonight, and also just nothing where I was, unlike Friday's game where I was writing, doesn't win at the point of attack, gives up straight line drive. That seemed to get cleaned up a little bit. And we can talk about why that was. I think part of it was they stayed out of some bad lineups. But I think the issue that we saw on Sunday, maybe they've got to shift some guys in their tasks, and you can clean some of that up. But that's a good thing. You can point to a very specific thing you can do to address that. So that's me getting really, really entirely too wonky on it, but that's at least what I saw. Tell me if you think I'm off base or wrong on any of that.
So, I think it's always difficult in the beginning of the season, especially, when it comes to Gates, because Gates is a guy who wants to
experiment,
look at a lot of things and with his lineups. And he's like, we've started each game except for last. He, obviously with Phillips out, he swapped in Luke. But started big, like really big. Yeah. And that's not something that I think, preseason, as you're looking at the makeup of the roster, you're not thinking that, okay, we're going to start Ant and Sebastian Mack. Okay, that makes sense. But then we're going to go like Mark, Javon, and Sean. I'm not really sure, because now you have basically 3 guys on the floor who aren't going to help you create any space. Yeah. And it's at least the early returns with Mac are that, he's not going to be a guy you can never really rely upon to consistently hit threes. So now you've got Mark and you've got Sean on the floor with those guys, and Javon hasn't consistently made threes at a high clip, so you could say realistically 4 guys on the floor who aren't going to help you space. So I don't necessarily. What's that?
And you're trying to punch the ball inside to start games to Sean.
Yeah, and you're trying to get post ups. So yeah, I don't know that I necessarily love it. I realize we've also got some some odd lineups happening because Trent's not available, because Honor hasn't been available, Trent Burns isn't available, and then Sean Phillips last game. So like we've got like a lot of things sort of going on. There's things that, like I was hoping to kind of see early, and I feel like we've seen that. I feel like, Ant, the only thing that I want more from Anthony Robinson is more shot volume.
Yeah.
But when he's taking shots, like he's scoring the ball at a really high clip. You just got to convince him that instead of taking 8 shots a game, you need to be taking 14.
Yeah.
And Mark's looked really good. I mean, he's looked aggressive offensively right off the bat. That's something that I think you have to be excited about. I feel like he's also trying to give some longer leashes to Jaden Stone. And obviously Luke Northweather's played a lot more than maybe we thought he might kind of coming into the season. Some of that's some of the injury stuff, but I like that he's at least seeing what Stone's going to give them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, Warwick V2, who's kind of instant offense guy, a guy that you can trust to like make shots. The defense is maybe lacking at times, but certainly I think, he's got the athleticism where he could be a better defender if he, ever figured that end. But I think like with the guys who've been out, would we feel better like if we were seeing, Honor Boateng playing 20 to 25 minutes a night? Would we feel better if we were seeing that from like Trent Pierce, and maybe the guys that you're like, okay, like that, the exposure of some of these guys has been more than what you wanted, but by the time those guys are healthy, maybe they're at that 12 to 15 minutes instead of 25 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, and to the credit, like I think I looked at the lineup data again this morning because I did it last night and I needed coffee to make sure that I didn't screw it up. But one thing that changed dramatically from Friday to Sunday was they limited the amount of time that Barrett, T.O., and Jaden Stone were on the floor together as primary ball handlers. The numbers from Howard and against SEMO were not good when that was the case. Mm-hmm. Now, Sean was out there too, and we talked at times about Sean's defensive issues as well. So you had some lineups where you had two questionable defenders, and T.O. has struggled with ball handling. Well, they chopped that down on Sunday, and it was if Stone was on the floor, it was usually as a combo running alongside Ant. Maybe he was out there with Seb is a wing. If T.O. was out there, he was running a point and running the point. Mac was with him at combo. If T.O. was at combo, he was alongside Ant. So you really saw the lineups shift in a way where you kind of mitigated that. And T.O. still got to get better at valuing the basketball, but his net rating improved, I think, because defensively he got better, because I think he was in better defensive lineups. So I think that's the thing sometimes we have to do, and this is why we look at the lineup data after every game, because you really got to see how things get sculpted and reshaped a little bit, and how personnel pieces get moved around and adjusted for and acclimate and accounted for as they go through this. Are they sitting there doing the same thing we are? Maybe not in the same principle, but they've got synergy, they've got HDI. I'm sure they're looking at stuff and looking at lineups and going, things got a little bit sideways here. The film itself won't line the back end. The film was bad here. So I think, to their credit, they kind of shaped up the guard rotation. The question is, are they going, to your point, are they going to have Honor and Trent available at some point in the near future to where, we were talking before we came on about they can kind of get the wing rotation back to where it needs to be. Because if you can get, if the guard rotation is, the wing rotation is Honor, Cruz with Stone coming in third, and then Trent sliding down and helping out at the 4, then things start to look a little bit more natural, because now you're bumping Mark back down to the 4 with Trent. You can use Javon there as a 4, and then that lets you kind of slide some things around and slide pieces back to where they need to be in the lineup. Theoretically, if you look at where guys have been, maybe they keep going jumbo, and keep trying it. But I think if you look at kind of at least coming to the preseason and what the data and what the film would show, getting at least Trent, Pierce, and Honor Batang back might restore a little bit more semblance, because you've got guys that we projected outside the top 8 in minutes. Like Jaden Stone was outside the top 8 in minutes. He was close to 10th or 11th. He's 3rd in minutes right now. So I think getting guys back will also kind of resolve some of the wonky lineups and resolve some of the issues, because you're going to have guys, in their right place again, within the rotation. So we'll see. We'll see, what they do on Wednesday. I think it was probably wise to, use the week to let Honor and Trent, if they had any nagging stuff, get resolved. Don't risk them in, sub 250 games, and, get them ready for Minnesota, and which is a game that I think has sneakily grown in importance or value over the last week or so. So if you can start to get them back, that's great. But we also know sometimes they will use the bye games to ramp dudes back up a couple weeks before marquee games. So we'll see what they do Wednesday night, and if the bench gets a little longer. Hopefully it is, because I think they're going to need it. But it would also go along, I think, to resolving some of the things we're talking about, give us a little bit more clarity about kind of what we need to expect from the rotation over the rest of the month.
Yeah, I think, based on what we've seen, it's really tough to make any really assertive claims, because of who's been out. And I think we've all sort of been watching and wanting to see a little bit more of what I think have always been, very effective for them. And one of the things that they did, last season, when they were starting basketball games with Mark and Trent at the 4 and the 5. And that's really being a little bit smaller, but being more athletic, and, and having somebody like Trent who could be on the floor and help space the floor, but is also versatile defensively, is something that I think they haven't quite had yet this year. And going out there and I'm not trying to denigrate efforts from any of the bigs so far, but I think you're in a different place if you're playing, Javon at the 5 than you are trying to play him at the, at the 3. And it seems wherever you want to say the lineup is when they start the game, having him as either a 3 or a 4, he's having to guard somebody who he's probably not comfortable guarding.
Yeah.
And I just don't know that that's going to be the long-term fix. Now, is that something that's going to, change when all these bodies come back? I kind of hope so.
Yeah.
But I just I guess I'm not entirely sure what the point of the jumbo lineup is. They seem to be at least, outside of the SEMO game, decent on the glass. Yeah. They absolutely wiped VMI off the rebounds completely. And Howard lost the rebounding battle by a significant margin as well. So I'm hoping that the SEMO thing was a blip. If you're gonna go with that much size, they better rebound. The one thing that I would say, I'm okay, if that's what the goal is. I like smaller, more athletic lineups. I think you're going to force more turnovers that way. I think you're going to play the style that I feel like Dennis wants to play, on the defensive side with more athletic lineups. And that is going to mean that you're probably not going to be relying as much as we've seen on Sean Phillips and Luke Northweather. You're going to see guys you're going to see Mark Trent, and Javon, playing more minutes 4 or 5 than anybody might at the 3.
Yeah, but I think that's why you need Honor back, because he's physical enough. He's 6'6". He has the length, he has the physical strength to play there, and also handle some switches onto 4s. And so I think that's why you got to get him back, because that's just going to let you have that physicality that you need in the SEC on the wing to make some things happen there. So that feels like once you get him back, some things will lock in to place. Because when you looked at the lineups coming out of the K-State game, you saw more Mark played a little bit on the wing, but he still slid down to the 4. Javon slid down to the 4. So I think that's kind of where my head's at, is they went big early, but as the game unfolded, Honor wound up playing 28 minutes on the wing. It's like they started big, but the sub pattern got them into the situation where it was mostly Honor on the wing. So you could start big and see what that gives you early on. See if you establish something quickly. If it's rolling, you can stick with it, but you could sub Honor to it, and you can still have that wing presence. They can't do that right now. And so I think that's been the biggest thing. They can't look at that and go, oh man, the jumbos aren't working. Get Honor out there and let's shift it, but still be physical. So we'll see. We'll see when he's back and what he can give them and how he looks when he returns. So I don't want to absolve them for Friday. It was an awful defensive effort. They've had awful defensive efforts. You can point to one every year. I think you did. Penn was awful in the first one. That game was bad. The loss to Jackson State was awful. Last year at Eastern Washington, they needed Grill to go nuts. But I looked at it, and then after the Eastern Washington game, they ripped off like 4 or 5 games where the game score was 85 plus. They got the lineups fixed. They got things locked in, and they figured it out for the most part. The issue defensively last year came in the home stretch. But there's inevitably one clunker early. You just hope SEMO was the clunker. Guys get healthy and they lock in and things get resolved as they move through the rest of November. That's the optimist case. But again, that's why I think Minnesota is going to be good, because Minnesota is very, very much like Mizzou offensively. They are maybe not as transition dependent, but you put on the game tape of them running offense, it's eerily similar to what Missouri does under Dennis. So I think it's going to be a good gauge to see them playing a guy that kind of plays the way they do and has 3 or 4 and has a core that I think is actually pretty good. So that's what I'm eager to see, on Wednesday night. What do they do when they face someone who's kind of like them? And, if they've got the pieces back, what does that look like? Because Kansas State wasn't like them. Kansas State doesn't play the way they do. But I think Minnesota's going to be interesting because it's going to be a like-for-like matchup in a lot of ways stylistically.
And coached by Niko Medved, who's a guy, we sort of touted as a potential replacement, several years ago. He ended up, staying at Colorado State, had really, really good success Colorado State his last couple of years, and then sort of, and now he's back home. So he's a Minnesota guy. That was one of those things I think was always going to kind of happen. I think if he was going to make a move, I think he wanted to make a move back home. And it is an interesting roster. He's got a couple reclamation projects, including Cade Tyson, who I think is a guy who's really kind of stood out for them early. Mm-hmm. Maybe not a lot of people remember Tyson. He was a guy who was a big money winner. The NIL portal stuff last offseason. He turned a really nice sort of year at Belmont into a big payday at North Carolina, and just was not what people at North Carolina thought he was going to be, and really struggled to be a factor. But he's at least starting out there in Minnesota, has played really well, and certainly that Medved teams are going to be well coached. They're going to run good offense. They're going to generate a lot of good looks. And so I think this is going to be a game that we're going to get a good look at sort of like what the expectations are from Missouri early, and like you said, a team that matches up with them, style wise in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think Nico's done. I'm putting together kind of the look ahead. I think he's done what a lot of high major coaches did this spring, which was he got 4 to 6 really good pieces, and now he's looking at his bench and going, "Where's my 7 through 9 or 10 guys?" And that's not a knock. There are a lot of programs that went through that. But I think Cade Tyson, North Carolina's forever now looking for their Brady Manick at the 4. A guy who is a floor stretcher who's sneakily, able to play off the bounce. He's a crafty guy and, can hold up defensively. And that was not Cade last year. He played 32 minutes in ACC play. I mean, Hubert mothballed him after non-con. And was that the right fit? Was that on Cade? Was that on Hubert? I don't know. But the guy shot 45% on high volume at 2 years in a pretty good MVC at a pretty good program in Belmont. So to me, the numbers were there to show that he's got a legitimate shot tool. And so far through 2 games against admittedly really, really weak teams, what are we looking at there?
Gardner-Webb and Alcorn
State. He's shooting 45% from 3 on the same volume. So 3 out of 2 really good years on that volume at Belmont. Bad system fit maybe at UNC, but he's back shooting well early. So I think the shot tool is still there for him. He's a guy who can shoot one dribble pickups off the bounce. But I think the benefit for Missouri is if you can play tight and close out well and force him to drive, you substantially take the threat down on him. He is, I've watched him in transition. He's not, elite foot speed is not something that will be associated with him, and there's not a lot of vertical pop, even off 2 feet running on the break. So I think if you can make him into a driver, things get a little bit easier for you there. But don't worry, Nico got a slasher in Langston Reynolds from Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado needs to just start building in contracts for guys. Because what did they have? They had Dalton Connect. They had a guy they sent to USC last year, and now Langston Reynolds is coming out.
Was that St. Thomas?
Yeah, St. Thomas. So it's gone Dalton Connect, St. Thomas, Langston Reynolds. They churn out really good slashing guards there on the wing. Reynolds is that guy. Loves to play in transition. Shoots it well enough off the catch that you have to close out to him. But then he's just going to put the ball on the deck going right and get to the rim. He's aggressive. He's physical, 6'4", 205. Not really a true combo, but a good enough slasher there. Really smart cutter, too. If you over-rotate, if you get leveraged, if you do a crappy job staying in front of the ball and force the baseline help to rotate up, he's going to cut, and he's going to get there, and he's going to finish. The question will be, how does that fit with what Nico wants to do? Nico likes to usually have 2 ball handlers. Langston's not a traditional ball handler. And then he brought Jalen Crocker-Johnson with him from Colorado State, who's kind of a good system fit guy. He's averaging a double-double, 15 and 14 through 2 games. So point is, he's got 3 guys. He's got a slasher at combo guard. He's got a floor spacing wing. And he's got kind of a bully ballish 4, who's also got a little bit of passing chops to it. So I think that's the thing that worries you is he's got all the pieces he needs to make his offense go. And are there depth questions? Yes. But he found the 3 things he absolutely needed to find to make his at least his starting 5 competitive. And Bobby Durkin's a fun guy who came from Davidson. He's a 4-man who can shoot it really well on high volume. And Robert Valhalla is just a mauler. He's going to rebound. He's going to block stuff. He's going to jump in front. He's going to create deflections on post entries. It's going to be a team for the first 5 or 6 guys that can give you some fits. And we know Nico runs good stuff. So I'm eager to see kind of what that is. And Nico's teams could handle some physicality. Roddy was physical. Crocker-Johnson was physical. Tanji was physical. Even Isaiah Stevens as a point guard would seek out contact and ball screens. I don't think the physicality, at least if you look at Nico's teams, is going to make them back up if Missouri gets into them a little bit. So I'm interested to see this one. It's teams that run similar stuff, guys that are comfortable with physicality, and Nico may have found some guys that can at least give him basically what he wants to execute with. So it should be fun.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting, important game. Missouri has not really loaded up their schedule in November with anything that should challenge them outside of this game. Now I realize that, I say that and, they were nail biting playing SEMO the other night, but, when you actually look at how that game should have gone, that's more what I mean. So, the remaining schedule, is Prairie View A&M, South Dakota, South Carolina State, Cleveland State, for the rest of the month. So, only 2 of those teams are inside the top 300. Prairie View and South Carolina State are sub 340.
South Dakota, if it takes a hit, could fall sub 300.
Yeah, like
So
South Dakota's at 295, and Cleveland State's they're quality. Good old Rob Summers, former Mizzou staffer, now running that program there. Nearly had the game won against Loyola Chicago in the opener.
took a bad beat at the buzzer.
But Sister Jean stepped in and blessed that shot to go in. I'm guessing. So we're this is the first and what should really be the only test. I'm curious if Dennis is gonna turn his guys fully loose, at least as far as the guys who have been dinged up. I would love to at least see Honor. Like I feel like just having that guy in would make it a big difference, and then I feel like you could probably get by with the rest of the guys. But like you're going to have to commit to defending. I do think that one of the things that Missouri does well, and if they're able to do that well and then get to the free throw line, you're going to put a team without a lot of depth into maybe some dire straits, and that could maybe play into your benefit. Man, I just want to see this team kind of put together some consistent effort game over game, and maybe that's some of the rotational stuff that'll get sorted out.
Yeah. I want to see. I don't want to downplay the result here because this thing started out as a quad 3 game probably, but when you look at predictive models as a proxy for the net, Minnesota's pushed into the 60s. That pushes you into quad 2 territory. Quad 2 versus quad 3 on the resume. It's not going to make or break you, but it's just nice to have one more quad 2 game in the setup there, because then it's 4 quad 1 or 2 games coming out of non-con, and that's a little more tolerable. I think to a certain extent, they're going to do what they do with the quad 4s. That's their philosophy. We've talked about, the pros and cons of it, but if Minnesota gets...
We beg them to do a little, differently, and...
But we understand that the Thanksgiving week is a tough time to schedule as well. So I get it. Big deal is if you can get a win tomorrow, no margin, but you get a quad 2 win at home early, that's good. And that gives you a buffer if Notre Dame's jacked up and wants to take you out. That can offset something. So the hope is pocket it, hope it ages well, hope you get at least Honor back and get him into the mixer. I'd like to see that. And then use the rest of the month to ramp the Trents up, and then you go to Notre Dame feeling like you've got some momentum going. But
and they do fully expect Sean Phillips to probably could have played. So Dennis seems to always be a little cautious. I'm thinking like let's find some minutes for Honor. Let's get him back and going, and then through the rest of November you get the Trents back involved, and hopefully you're fully spun up by the time Notre Dame and KU roll around. Yeah,
and I think it's hard to kind of judge the rotation as well. And I was going to mention this earlier. I charted the offensive stuff. I mean, they're really relying on their secondary break right now, and they're really running a lot of 5-out ball screen stuff. So I've seen some people say, comment about the offense being stagnant, comment about, what they're not doing offensively. This is something that we see in quad 3 and quad 4 games with Dennis. They don't really run a lot of the pistol action stuff. They don't run a lot of the triangle concept stuff. It's a lot of 5-out ball screen stuff. I think the issues with the post up is that Missouri doesn't play through the post a lot. So its guys aren't really used to playing off the post as much, because that's not what Missouri typically does. So I think as the rotation fills out and as the schedule gets tougher, usually we start to see the play calling for Missouri get more diverse. So I had some people, say the play calling has been bad. The offenses look stagnant at times. They're rolling a lot of bodies through. They're keeping the play calling pretty vanilla. We'll see on Wednesday night if they've got Honor back and they've got the full complement of guys. Do they open the playbook up a little bit more? That's what I'm interested to see as well. Do we expand the play call stuff beyond, just secondary break, come down, play in various 5-out alignments and ball screens? we'll see if that changes. That's the other thing to keep an eye on is do they mix it up a little bit as the opponent quality gets better? So that's the last thing I'm probably going to be keen to see is what does it look like when they get a little bit more verve in the play calling.
And I'd also like to point out that something that you and I were talking about before we came on the air. The SEC has taken a little bit of a step back, and so like when you're looking at the rest of the league and like where you kind of see your fit in the league. Mississippi State's down 19 to Iowa State. Texas A&M got blasted
hammered
pretty hard by Oklahoma State, who I think a lot of people are thinking
Picked
Oklahoma
12th
State
in the SEC.
might be a bubble team, like if things go well for them. There's a lot of teams, especially in the middle of the SEC, who haven't quite performed at the same level that maybe they were last year. And so what that means is like if you're able to, and you can navigate some of these early waters, you can get guys back and healthy, and you can pick up a couple big wins in the non-con, you could make some noise in the SEC. And I think like that's that's the thing that's sort of opening up when you're looking at this. Alabama looked great against St. John's, but they always look great scoring the ball. There's still some questions about how they're going to defend. Yeah, I mean,
Texas fell off and kind of ran into a wall at Duke. Oklahoma,
Florida lost to Arizona, and in doing so, some of the things I think people that were skeptical of Florida being able to like repeat as national championships were pointing out is like, look, Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee, are good players, but they're not the backcourt that you
they
just
had
graduated.
last year. Yeah, so it's. I think that there's the closest game that we saw played were Florida played Arizona tight. Obviously, Alabama won, and Arkansas, who we like, we're higher on Arkansas than the consensus, had a tough game at Michigan State. But you look at teams like Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, and these kind of P4 matchups have struggled a little bit. And that's really where the SEC was good last year, were spots like 6 through 13. So to your point, if Missouri comes out tomorrow comes out Wednesday and looks pretty good against Minnesota, they're a 7-point home favorite. If Missouri wins by like 10 or 12, that's still a good result because Missouri's beat the margin against a team that's, pretty comparable, to what they're going to see in the middle of the SEC. Minnesota's picked 16th in the Big Ten. The Big Ten's probably better than it. Not probably. The Big Ten has more depth this year than the SEC. If Minnesota was in the ACC or the Big 12, they'd probably be around 8th or 9th. So it's a quality team coming in. In any other conference, they might be a bubble team or might play their way to a bowl status. So it's not going to be a glittering win, but it could be a quad 2 win. And when everyone else around you, like you said, is taking losses by double digits, it's in these kinds of games might be a good sign that Missouri's set to maybe overachieve. But they got to do it. We'll see what they do. We'll see what the rotation looks like. I don't want to jinx them right now. So,
so I think you and I think we're going to wrap this up. The new goal is to try to, keep these a little bit shorter. And we're going to be moving back to kind of like a weekly show. So we'll just kind of keep coming back live mostly on Mondays unless there's a game on Monday. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong. They play next Monday, so we probably won't go next Monday. Maybe we'll wait until Tuesday to record. But kind of going on from here on out, it looks like, Mondays are going to be pretty free and clear.
Except until bragging rights.
Yeah. So
but that's fun. That's a fun reason not to record. The only other thing I'll say is signing day is Wednesday.
Recruiting.
Mizzou's going to sign 3 players. Recruiting for 2026 is done.
Who are those players?
They will be signing Jason Crow, a top 10 prospect combo guard, 5-star.
5-star.
They'll be signing a high 4-star in Tony Bryant.
I'm giving him 5.
Fine, round up. You can round up if you want. And then Aiden Chronister, 4-star wing, will be coming in.
5. No, he's a 4-star.
We've already last week I put up kind of a good, I hope it was a good kind of wrap up piece on the 26 class. Little sting that they didn't get one of 3 local bigs to round that out. High school bigs were good locally this year. They could have used one of them. Was not in the cards. So they will probably go to the portal. Not probably, they will go to the portal again.
I cannot wait until we can actually start talking about like the money stuff. Like, I want these contracts public so we can all just be like, look, man.
Good on Tristan Reed for waiting for the market, man.
He got paid. He worked the market perfectly and got a lot of money to go to Starkville.
And we say that with no hate or vitriol in our hearts.
No, I would have done the same thing. You want to pay me, probably, a lot more money than I make now.
Yeah.
to go live in Starkville, I would do it.
And he's a system fit. He will fit with what Jans wants to do. So he got a payday, and there's an okay system fit.
Yeah.
Can't hate it. Cannot hate it at all. We support kids. We support players getting what they want and doing what they need to do to have success. So Tristan got it. Good for him. That's another way of saying poorly that we're going to have a preview for Wednesday, or coming out on Thursday. I'll have a kind of a look ahead to the 2027 class and some names there and kind of what they're going to do to supplement, or could do to supplement, Scotty Atkinson. So there will be a little bit of Cruton midweek, but we're in the time when real games are here, so that's what we focus on.
Love it. Even though I've been incredibly frustrated at times watching this team so far this year, this is I'm resigned to the fact this is my normal November Dennis Gates viewing experience.
The crash lab is open, baby.
High levels of frustration, usually a high level of collection of wins as well. So let's keep the train running. Let's get these guys to 4-0, 5-0 by the time that we meet next week. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you next week. Probably Tuesday night. So be on the lookout for another live broadcast. And until then, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.